Today, Rinpoche went over the 8th type of suffering, the suffering of the appropriated aggregates. He then concluded this section on the 8 types of suffering.
So on
page 271 in the English, we'll find the section that we're currently going over, the actual meditation on suffering.
What Jijunan Taringa to Tamalin Tamarwa and Dunga Jason Jeba. What the Jebat Leduro?
That's a Jeba.
Tatombo, what the Dunga Rosi Donna Dunga Jid, what the Red or Dunga J. Larijim Sajin 7 Saji, what the Sajin, what the Dunga Jid Shosana, Chi Dunga, Gai Dunga, Nai Dunga, Chi Dunga, Maduba the Chibi Dunga, Duba the Tray Dunga, Duba Jet Manabi Dunga, Duna, Nyan and Pomunga Dunga, or Jiba Jit the Raw, Sajin Olo Tere, Jit Tere, Jit the Lowa, Nanga China Jijumarba, Tanga to Jiju non Tarin Juju Tamal Tamal Len Marba, Pomunga, Nyan and Pomunga Dranga Euro, the Jiju non Tamare.
Lesson. Yeah. So we're on page 271. So you have the major heading, the actual meditation on suffering. So when we're looking at the outline of the text, and in that we find 2 categories: reflection on the universal suffering of cyclic existence, or the general sufferings of cyclic existence, and then reflection on the specific sufferings. So those are the 2 categories. In that first category, reflection on the general or universal sufferings of cyclic existence, has 3 categories. Those 3 categories are reflection on the 8 types of suffering, reflection on the 6 types of suffering, and then reflection on the 3 types of suffering. So when we're looking at that first category, reflection on the 8 types of suffering, each of those 8 have 5 different categories within them for explanation. So we'd find actually 40 different categories if we're looking at it in that context. And we're in the last, we're at that last suffering, the suffering of the 5 appropriated aggregates section. But before we, and the 5 points there, but before we go over that, we can just look at the outline of the Lamrim Chenmo, and we can just list those 8 sufferings, just to go over them again. So we have first the suffering of birth, second the suffering of old age, third the suffering of illness or sickness, fourth the suffering of death, fifth the suffering of encountering what is unpleasant, the sixth the suffering of separation from what is pleasant, the 7th is the suffering of not getting what you want, and number 8 is the suffering of the 5 appropriated aggregates. So that's the actual one that we're going to go over today. So we'll find that on page 279.
So we're going to
go back to the outline first and look at the 6. So looking back at the outline, if we just list the 6 types of suffering, we have the suffering which is the fault of uncertainty, suffering which is the fault of insatiability, suffering which is the fault of casting off bodies repeatedly, suffering which is the fault of repeated rebirth, suffering which is the fault of descending from the high to the low, and then the suffering which is the fault of having no companions. So these are the 6 listed in the outline, and then the 3, so we have that last category, which is the reflection on the 3, are the suffering, the suffering of change, and pervasive compounded suffering. So those are the 3 categories. I think that they, Lamrim Chenmo, use a different suffering of conditionality is the pervasive compounded suffering in the Lamrim Chenmo. So those are the 6 and the 3 within the outline.
Ole zebetin sumbatel do na sadre do ne nyawala pomonga se ndo wote donge jigna ne wote jeba ta jeba do na nyawala be pomonga wote kusul angten wudo.
So page 279 again in the English, the suffering of the 5 appropriated aggregates. The Nija Jugo
Be이니자 주고래 올해 친송바는 도나냐 완전히 봉봉아 동야 송비 상바야 어떤 말봐 어떤 인자도 그서 된 거고 라사로와 어들 더냐 완전히 봉봉아 동야와 송비 상바랑아데스 다냐 완전히 봉봉아 Hotel düzgün asosyocu pombo suyu pombo düşeci pombo düzgün nabaşı pombo ngazu kalta konduyor orada. Newalen pombo ngade ote teli şajımı orada. Newalen pombo ngade ne ote lari çamene newalen pombo ngade redoa. Newalen pombo ngai dönsa bala ngade. Ngoban rubi dönge jünhö dans. Ngoban rubi denge jhö dans jije ngoba trubala tene denge jhö ta ngoba rubi denge jhö se ta kante phombo de bala tene jo shama pensi denge yuade denda lego sare ta zunga so le don yomo phombo de bala tene anti jo shama lo de denge yungres Ngoban rubi denge jhö se do din sare ngoba trubala tembi denge jhö se na ta nga so denge phombo de nga so tru chabaro ta tru chaba yin so so hotel tela tene chi denge gai denge nai denge la su mo yungres ngoba trubi denge jhö se do din sare ta denge jhö ta denge nga so 다 동해지 동해로 소화 동해 미차 소화 동해도 동해지 동해 되지 어떤가 저 동해와이나 동해지 동해와이나 동해지 동해 맞춰라고 말어 동해지 동해이나 소화 동해 그래서 파신도 봐야 되더라
동해와이나 동해와이나 맞춰
동해와이나 동해지
동해와이나
동해지 동해 맞춰라고
주의
동해 최지선디로 단 주의 동해서 당아 소거데 그 사직도 와주로 사직도 와 그디비 zulα tembido wa dala tembido wa trala tembido wa rula tembido wa rijala tembido wa wa tusukungal juido wa sadin samarba juido wa juido dans ta duyeje dongaje raje du chobate tala ya samba wo so wote ngaba tere doa duyeje dongaje chaban duyeje dongasa dagande ku pombo de ko men do ku pombo donge pombo ya tere ya ne san tamba de wote ne pombo nga donge wa samba so wote tere sirwa ta tenga de 다 되는마 다다 지주 나는 것들인도 다
Less so.
다 나이 나는 어때 달라 동부네서 달라 동부네 동부대인 봐 ngaba drubi de ngai no de ba ngaba drubi de ngai ne ngato chiwa shama de ngai mo sa de ngaba drubi de ngai ne tambo ne nyelen je pombo de lamba la tenes le de nyomo mo ojo pombo de lamba la tene ane chiwa shama de ngai mo de ti shama de ngai mo re ne o de tambo de do tambo de hotel ko gores ane ngaba drubi de ngai ne sa de da karesna ane nyolen pombo de lamba la tene chiwa shama de dengan jungwares what ngaba drubi dengan sa tel ko gores kale junamara.
Okay. So on page 279 we find the major heading, the suffering of the five appropriated aggregates. Then the NGK logo, the Lamrim Chenmo. The suffering of the five appropriated aggregates. So I'm going to just read the Buddha said in brief, the five appropriated aggregates are suffering. Reflection on the meaning of this teaching again takes in 5 points. It is the nature of the five aggregates appropriated by karma and the afflictions to be. So then there are these 5 categories. So what are the 5 aggregates? What does this mean? These aggregates are form, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness. So these are the 5 aggregates. And these 5 aggregates are brought on by our karma and the afflictions. So there are 5 points that are made here about the suffering of the 5 appropriated aggregates. So these are 5 among the 40. So we have a total of 40 when we look at all of the 8 categories, and these are within that major category. So there are the 5 that have to do again with the suffering of the 5 appropriated aggregates. So the first is it's vessels for future suffering. So it is suffering because we have these 5, in dependence upon these 5 appropriated aggregates that we took on due to our karma and afflictions, we have to in our future lives suffer. So this is the point made about the first category, that these aggregates become vessels to future suffering. In dependence upon them, we suffer. So this is the first. Number 2, vessels for suffering based on what presently exists. Because we are currently, our basis of aggregates was brought about by karma and afflictions. Because we have this, we have suffering. So because we have these aggregates brought out in this way, we suffer currently. Therefore, it's suffering because they're vessels for suffering based on what presently exists, the suffering we're presently having. The next category is vessels for the suffering of pain. So the suffering of pain is necessarily a suffering feeling. If it is a suffering feeling, it is necessarily a suffering of pain. If we look at 2 categories, if we look at the category, we'll use these 2 English words again so we can differentiate pain and then actual suffering. If we compare those 2 categories, we'll find that there are 3 permutations, because if it is pain, it is necessarily suffering, but if it is suffering, it is not necessarily pain. And if we were to say, well, posit that which is suffering but not pain, we would say the suffering of change. The suffering of change is suffering, but it is not suffering of pain, because it's not a feeling suffering, and therefore, since if it is a feeling suffering, it's necessarily suffering of pain, then it's not suffering of pain. So suffering of pain is just that, feelings of pain that are suffering. The next, vessels for the suffering of change. The suffering of change refers to contaminated happiness. Contaminated happiness that we experience in relation to form, in relation to smells, in relation to tactile sensations, in relation to sounds, in relation to tastes. So I might have repeated that. But so this is what is meant by contaminated happiness. This happiness that is within cyclic existence that is contaminated. And so this is a type of suffering. And this is called the suffering of change. And then the fifth category is vessels for the suffering of conditionality. So this is the pervasive compounded suffering. And this means having to take on these aggregates of cyclic existence, these suffering aggregates within cyclic existence. So it's a vessel for the suffering of having to take on these aggregates, which are, but not, they're specifically aggregates that are cyclic existence. That's it. So, need some critiques.
This way. What that the Nyalan Pumunga doing what not on what the Ngoban Ruby doing agent, Ngoba Truby doing agent, Ngoban Rubas and the Maoba Maoba, baby, Maobi Kishare, Ngoba Trubas and Tatawa, Ngoban Ruby doing agent, Ngoban Ruby doing agent, Maoba, Joa Shama Shamale, or doing a younger Maoba Lukuname, Ngoba Trubas and Tata. And Tata Pombo doing a Pombo Lavasadu, Chi doing a guy doing a night doing a Tata Yungo Rata, Ngoba Truba, doing a genuine dance nearby the J. Nearby the J, that doing a Jew doing a Chaban Juju doing what the Redua. That Tombo what the Ngoban Ruby doing a genuine did doing that careers and not tell. Tambones, Ngoban Ruby doing agent said, Ngoban Ruby doing agent to show Sana, Tambone, Nielange Pombonde, later number August, Nielange Pombo the Lamba Latene, Joa Shama Penchi, doing Jambos, Joa Shama Penchile, T Shama Shamale, and the doing Juicy Guetan, Ngoban Ruby doing agent, some mobile hotel corners, Mada.
Tambo.
Tambo che. Ta neba Pombo de Truba Latene, Ngoba Trubason, Tataro. Pombo de Truba Latene, led on Yamba Mogushun, Zuju Pombola Suba, Tasu Truba Latembe, Nai Dunga, Chi Dunga, Gai Dunga, what they doing to Yungorota, Ngoban Truba Latembe Dunga, what the Gogores, Tanto Chuba was, Neba, what they need the college Juna.
So we're going to look at these 5 points again. So the first point, vessels for future suffering. So Rinpoche was going over the words in the Tibetan and showing how the actual Tibetan word means Momba, means later or in the future. So what this means is that by the future or later, it's referring to our next life and our life later, our life after that. So our future lives, and then our future lives. So this is what is meant by that. So because of these aggregates that are brought on by our karma and afflictions, we will suffer in the future. So they become vessels to that future suffering. So that's the first category. The second category, vessels for suffering based on what presently exists. So this is referring to right now. So what time is this referring to? It's referring to now. So we have the various types of suffering, the suffering of birth, the suffering of aging, sickness, etc. And this suffering exists because we have this basis of aggregates that was brought on by our karma and afflictions. So therefore, at this present time, we have to endure the various types of suffering. So this is category number 2. And then number 3, the suffering of pain. Number 4, vessels for the suffering of change. And then number 5, vessels for the suffering of conditionality. So this is what is meant by those 5, and again, emphasis on the first 2, vessels for future suffering. That's the future that we will be thrown into. So Rinpoche used the word the throwing karma of in the future of our that in our afflictions will then bring about these suffering aggregates, these 5 aggregates in the future. So, and then the second is dealing with right now, the various types of suffering we'll have to endure now because of it. Dikson.
Ta nyawale phombo nyawado nebe phombo bala tene ngoban rubin he phombo bala tene ane chewa shama penjile ode donga yungu yobate chuki lena yungure chuki melena yungure ne dindule yungure ngandule yungures ode chamal chawde siremudo a
the chuk dharma practice religious
nambale yungure shibale yungure ode chu yose kansule te yungure chu mense kansule te yungure dindule te yungure ngandula te yungure ode ngeja chabudo so a
so this vessels for future suffering means that because of the karma and afflictions, we have this throwing karma or propelling karma that thrusts us into our future life and our future lives, and those lives in the future we are suffering. So these 5 appropriated aggregates become vessels which bring us to that future suffering, those future lives of suffering. And if we are religious practitioners, we have suffering. If we are not religious practitioners, we have suffering. If we are Buddhists, we have suffering. If we are non-Buddhists, we are suffering. If we are in the higher realms of cyclic existence, we have suffering. If we are in the lower realms of cyclic existence, we have suffering. So we find that the suffering is in all of these places if the life itself was brought about by our karma and afflictions.
tan ju de da de ji de ju de ne be de den do dang ga changma le yong ro da wa de de zu ka sa ge chao chou do da de ji de de ne sun le yo re den do le yo re mar be ane wa de ju de ga sa na do de ne sun de den do changma le yo ji ro da de ji de da ju de ne what that the somba de jeba ni to the dunga ju dunga the marba somba de jeba ne dunga ni buti ne ngala ji jesun de teni je ba os ta dunga ju dunga de ju dunga da ju dunga ni butle what ngoban dubi dunga ji no da ngoban dubi dunga ni no de what 가서 그래 그쯤에도 군일 거디요 그래서 어디서 그만도 아 송바데 제바니 동행이 부티 노반두비 동행이 hnö다 노반두비 동행이 부티 냉엘지 제순제 되니 제바오스 냉엘지 쭌다 노반두비 동행다 노반두비 동행이 동행이 부터 주시 발라 때네 어느 어디 가지고 그랬더니 동행이 동행다 주 동행도 용어가 됐어 어디 손도 거기서 말해 송바다 제반이네 동행이 부터 뭐번 두비 동행이 나도 뭐번 두비 동행이 나이지로 니부티 냉엘에서나 티 준다지 티 제소 되니 주시 발라 때네 제 되니 제보스 주제발라 되네 주 동안 제용과래 네 동아지 동안 제용과레스 what 사마르바
So it says reflect on these again and again. Here with regard to the first point, you induce suffering in future lives by taking up these appropriated aggregates. As for the second, the appropriated aggregates form the basis for states such as illness and old age that are grounded in already existing aggregates. The third and fourth become fourth, both come about because the appropriated aggregates are linked with dysfunctional tendencies towards these two types of suffering. So when we look at the vessels for suffering of pain and vessels for the suffering of change, the Dugyao, the Ju Dugyao, the Dao Ritu Yubicha.
Dungaji Dunga Tan Ju Dunga Roa, Dungaji Dunga Da Roa Ritu Tamal Pechi Ejimar, Dungaji Dunga what Zukan Liumar,
Okay.
Zukan Zumen Ejimaro. Tan Dukan do the Matan de Latan Nason to Zulu.
When we look at I just had to check something. So when we look at vessels for suffering of pain and suffering of change, all of the higher realms of the God, within the desire realm, the gods, the demigods, and humans have these sufferings, and the lower realms of cyclic existence of the hell, hungry ghost, and animals. But we don't find in the formless realm the Zudan Zume, the
Zumen Dungan Gonjo Mendos, Zuda Zumen, Zumen Kantan, Zukanso, Dungan Gonjo, Messidule, Dungan Messa with Marba.
So there's not this manifest suffering in the form and formless realm. So therefore, there is not the suffering of pain and suffering of change in present. Right.
What did you what Somba the Jabani to what Dungaji Dungan, Jew Dungani, but the Dungani, but tea, Neng and Lanchi Jesu, Mobandu Dungatan, Mobatu Dungani, but tea. Neng and Lanchi Jesu, Tinik Geshe Lharampa, what the Jesun Jay, Tinicheba was, Mobandu Dungata, Mobatu Dungani, Yoba Lharampa, and Dungaji Dungat Chain Ware, and then Jew Dungat Chain Waters, Tinicheba was.
As regards to the fifth, the very existence of the appropriated aggregates constitutes the nature of the suffering of conditionality, because all of the compositional factors which depend upon the previous karma, so this becomes the cause of the previous karma, and afflictions are the suffering of conditionality. Because of this, we then have the suffering of suffering and the suffering of change, this experience. Because of that.
Tangapa what the Nabandere, Naba Nyawale, Pombo, Nyawale, Leton Yumbo, August, Pombo de Le, Nyawale, Pombo Lagmarba. Leton Yumbo, August, Pombo de Nyawale, Pombo. Nyawale, Pombo, Trutan Chase, Nyawale, Pombo, Trutan J, Duji Dungaji, Rajin to Chetis, Nyawale, Pombo, Trutan, and then what the truth on the Chaban Duji doing a Rajin Jet waters, and then Sheba Jet on the Matab Rajin Jet waters, and then Sheba to Guru, Cheba on the Matab Rajin Jet, Sheba the Matab do not Chebers, Lagumarba,
same time.
Sheba Jedu Namataba Jewaris, Marba. Sheba Namata G Dujibaris, Sheba Jedu Mataba Jewaris, Narus Sheba Jibis, no, Kaji Jibi, Chude Jedu Waris. What then Rabishon said in your one pombo truth on J, truth on Jinyan, let the Yomo pombo truth on J, Chaban Duji Dungaji, Rajite, Trudu Waris, Rajit Jete. Let on your mobile Hame you want to Chune, Hame you want to Chubis, Luigi Taji, Luigi doing Imishosa. Let on your mobile Hame you want to Chubi, Luigi Taji, and Chaban Luigi doing Imishes. What did you think good in Somaraba?
So, as regards the fifth, the very existence of the appropriated aggregates constitutes the nature of the suffering of conditionality. because all of the compositional factors which depend on previous karma and afflictions are the suffering of conditionality. So all of the composition. So I'm having trouble with this section with the arisal. So Jewa and Sheba. Jewa. I'm just having trouble with this, and I'm just wondering if you can help.
Jewa, Jeba in impermanent. That's not regarding the group. Jewa, Jeba, Midawa.
Impermanence.
Impermanence.
Right. So what Rinpoche was saying that at the same time, I'm just trying to find the link.
Not in this link. Rinpoche takes as an example for instance like a Midaba.
Impermanence.
Impermanent and the Jeba functioning. At the same time, as soon as the impermanent come to exist, the functioning factor come to exist by the same time. Like this, as soon as you got five aggregate come to exist, at the same time, suffering is there.
So the 5 aggregates come to exist at the same time as?
The suffering already there.
Oh, the suffering is there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So the
example and then use impermanent as an example.
Oh, okay. Decent.
Yeah. What ngaba nyawan phombo tru tang ji nyawan le no nyomo phombo tru tang ji do duje ji do ngai ji ra ji che de so de le sheba tru tang mata be ra ji che den da bu mu do den da bu song de sa.
So the suffering, the karma and the afflictions bring about this, and then bring this about, and then the suffering exists at the same time at this occurrence. When these appropriated aggregates are come about by the karma and the afflictions, the suffering is there at the same time.
Nyawan le phombo ngel tru duje ji do ngai shu tru ba ten de bes den ma res. Nyawan phombo tru zang ne chaban duje ji do ngai ra ji che de yo res. Sheba tru zang ne mata ba ra ji den da bun da song de sa ma re.
So when these, so it's very similar to if there is the presence of Sheva, functioning thing, then there is this impermanence. Likewise, if there are these appropriated aggregates that are brought on by karma and afflictions, there is that suffering there.
Oh, that then what the ngaba ne dunga nyawan phombo tru zang ji dunga ji ra ji du che de jusen kar sana le jusen kar sana le da nyomo ba le da nyomo ba ngame jewa du chubi duji ta ji duji ji dunga yin bi sheros nyomo bi ngame jewa du chubi le da nyomo ba jewa du chubi an duji ta ji shaba duji dunga yin bi she. So
that all of those compositional factors which are brought about by the karma and the afflictions are the suffering of conditionality. So when it's speaking of this karma aggregates, it means that aggregates that are brought about by karma and afflictions. Aggregates brought about by karma and afflictions.
Because all of the compositional factors which depend on the previous karma and affliction are the suffering of the conditionality.
Right, same thing.
So the same thing. So this one, I'm just saying that. Okay.
That which is a compositional factor brought about by karma and afflictions is necessarily the suffering of conditionality.
ane dunga ji raji tu che de sa de le da nyomo mo jwa tu chubi ane duji ta ji chaban duji ji dunga yin bi sharos wo de tru dan ti raji tu che de sun sa de.
So we find that all compositional factors which depend on or come into being because of karma and afflictions are necessarily the suffering of conditionality.
What the Gazanas of Tomo doing jail and
so when we look at 8 types of suffering, we actually look at 40 types of suffering. So we've finished now 40 different types of suffering.
What the
I see.
Le dan nyu mo ba ngame jama du jubi duji taji duji ji dong yin bi shi chaban duji dong yin bi shi ota jusen de ko isa de shi du dong song ji ka so she ba sha wo de shi cha bu du ul dong ji dong ju dong chaban duji ji dong she bu ko so ma je bu song yin song isa de shi du dong song ji ka so she ba sha wo sa what the Jusen the so Ulma, the Nasun Katu de Jebin Yungore,
so we have this reason here that's presented by Lama Tsongkhapa in the 5th, where it says, because all the compositional factors which depend on previous karma and afflictions are the suffering of conditionality. And then it says, this will be explained in detail in the section on the 3 sufferings. So later on in the text, when we get to the 3 types of suffering, there'll be a much broader, expanded explanation of this point.
Sheba Shao, Nyelaj Pombi Raji Koalas, Kua Nemashi, Majinas, Nyalan, Chaji Nyalan Pombi, the Naja Raji Tele. Never doing and Jung Samba Juma Mayba Majiba Ina, Majina, Taba Tunye, Lunema, Nema Chisa Majinsa, Sajin Pomputal Dunga Rajin Tune, Never Samba Majina, what they Taba Tunye, Juma Mayba to Yungsa, Majigamares, Majins. What this one is College Junamare.
If you do not cultivate a genuine sense of disenchantment with cyclic existence, the nature of which is the appropriated aggregates, you have no chance to develop a genuine mind intent on liberation. So here, this is saying that if you do not develop this disenchantment, then this desire to definitely emerge, renunciation, will not occur. So here it's saying disenchantment with cyclic existence, the nature of which is appropriated aggregates. So the nature of the cyclic existence are these contaminated aggregates that are so the appropriated aggregates, contaminated aggregates brought on by karma and afflictions. So if you don't cultivate this sense of disenchantment, you won't be able to generate renunciation.
Dendi rangi dendi se malate amami ne jenchi de kalaches rani dungel ngaban ju ngaju sambat mena jela me bin hinje de umares rangi dendi se malate amami ne jenchi de kalaches shweju mar shweju radin do koale ngaban ju ngaju sambat mena jen dungen jele me bin hinje umares. So then
it says you have no chance to develop a genuine mind intent on liberation. So one won't be able to generate this desire to definitely emerge, generate compassion, renunciation. And if one does not generate renunciation, then it becomes impossible then to generate compassion for others. And when we look at Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, Shantideva states that if we how could we, if we are unfamiliar with our own situation, even dream of someone else's? If we don't understand our own suffering, of cyclic existence, then how could we then understand others and have compassion for others' sense of suffering if we ourselves haven't generated a desire to emerge from it, a desire to renounce or be free from cyclic existence. So then it goes on to make this point in the Lamrim Chenmo as a translator's note. So.
What the Dhamma, what the Abbot Kadu to Marbet, what the Nanju Sambat Naru, what the Tibasung, and Tenkalo, Nanju Sami Debunon Juduaris, Netuji Rajaji Langa, Tiji Langa, Taji, Nanju Sami Deburis, Nanju Samba Man Netu Langa Yungumare, Raja Langa Yungumare, Tiba Chembi Langa Hakane Yungumare, what the Tamal Jinros, what the Tosun Jabu inside.
Then they're long or.
Okay,
so in the all of the excellent qualities, goes on to say, all of the excellent qualities of the three vehicles come about because of renunciation. So all of the 5 paths of the hearer's vehicle, the solitary realizer's vehicle, and the bodhisattva's vehicle are caused by renunciation. It goes on to say this then in the text, that all of these excellent qualities are results of renunciation.
Trouble then be doing it in house. Nobody be doing it as a Jewish angel doing you say at the bar. Nobody trouble then be doing as a Pombo to Trota will check on Nachi doing us over to younger at the Imba. That doing it in her than you doing it in her, but what they doing you with the what in Jebres. Nobody to be doing it down. Nobody to be doing any with the Jewish Balatene doing it doing water, Chabaduji doing waters. Ju doing a marva, doing in her down, you doing in her down, Duji Rajin, Duji doing Rajin to Jobates, Nabatroa, the Tadala Yang, Samba Wosa,
cheaper.
Yang Samba Wosa. That what the Laricham Dabudu, Tela Tambune, Nielange Pum de Lamba Latene, Joa Shama Penji. Doing the Jambo was Dabudua. Niba doing Pumbo Trusin Balatem, ne Jai doing a night doing a suchi, 10 Sheba horse. That's one about the Jeba, ne doing the Jew doing anything. Somebody the Jeba ne doing any buti. And then what do we do it? What do we do any with tea? And let's say, Jewish about the ten. You don't get the Chaba do any to waters. Then I just wonder what day. Jay, the Nijaba Wosa. Don't get you don't get you doing any chain waters. No one do we do it. What do we do any Latin? And then don't get you don't get you doing any chibers. Tangaba Nabanyela Pombo Trutan Duji Raji to Chetes, Nele Pombo Trutan, what the Chaba Duji Dunga Raji to Cheduares. Justin Garasana, Nelun Hami, you want to be Duji Tajin Duji Dunga Imbisharosa. Justin what the Lodge of the Jedu Chiba and Dua Imbisharos, Nele Pombi Raji. Nilange Pombi Raji Koala, Joa Nemash Machina, Nilange Pombi, Dunganji Rajin Letene, Joa Nemash Matena, Nanju Samba, Nemash Machina, Nanju Samba Yabaji Machiba Ina, Tabat Duneji Lo, Jessa Majins, Tabat Dunego Lungo Mares, Sentient Koa Chambala, Fiji Sambayan. Cheto Mabes, Rangiton, the Descent, Malota, Mammy, Genji, the College, one dozen Rabumu. Teba Chajun Kanto Jojam. Samba de Kechos, Tijan Juba in Andra, Temen Juba in Anju, Samba Sera Kechos, Kechos. What the Latin Dino Lord and what the double.
So when we look at the medium, Papa's medium stages on the path to enlightenment, the medium Lamrim, we find the presentation as well, and it's the same. For the points are the same. So it goes to say the suffering of the 5 appropriated aggregates are explained with 5 points that are made. So 5 points to show that these 5 aggregates, appropriated aggregates, are vessels for future suffering. So in our future lives, one will have to suffer because of these 5 appropriated aggregates that are brought about by karma and the affliction. So then the next vessels for suffering based on what presently exists. So we presently have to experience the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, etc. So we're having to experience this because we have these aggregates that are brought on by our karma and afflictions. And then the karmachi. Then vessels for the suffering of pain, vessels for the suffering of change, and vessels for the suffering of conditionality. So then it says, reflect on these again and again. So think about this again and again. So the first point, you induce or bring about suffering in your future lives because of taking on these appropriated aggregates, because you have this growing karma, the afflictions that bring about these appropriated aggregates. You have to have suffering. Suffering happens in your future life. And then the second means that from the basis of these appropriated aggregates that you currently have, you have to experience illness and you have to experience old age. Because you already have these aggregates are already there. And then the third and fourth become about because they're linked with dysfunctional tendencies, with these afflictions, karma and afflictions. We have so the third and the fourth come about. It's very similar. Third and fourth both come about because the appropriated aggregates are linked with dysfunctional tendencies toward the 2 types of suffering. So the suffering of pain and the suffering of change. So when it says the 2 types of suffering. As regards to the fifth, the very existence of appropriated aggregates constitutes the nature of the suffering of conditionality, because all the compositional factors are caused by the previous karma and that are caused by previous karma and afflictions are the suffering of conditionality. And then if you don't cultivate a genuine sense of disenchantment with cyclic existence, the nature which is the appropriated aggregates, then you will not be able to develop a mind intent on liberation, nor be able to generate compassion for others. So you won't be able to fulfill your own needs or the needs of others. So your own meaning and others' meaning can't be fulfilled if you don't generate this desire to think about these and generate disenchantment and then renunciation. All of the excellent qualities of the Mahayana and Hinayana come about from this. So we'll take a short break. Started? Okay.
다 등에 지에들 응아지는 지주 다른 사람들에 주 다른 사람에 냐래 보문가들라 안에 응아다 해보고도 되고 사진 자주 사진이 지금도 어디 응아도 차지 다 해보고도 되고 되네래자 해보고도 되고 자주 배워대 해보고도 되고 마두두지 말에 다 되네 어디 Donashido, Donation because Shebasha was what there, Juju and his hundred. And Donashido, Donation because Shebasha was there and Jedler, Donate Jedranga Juju Tare, Tan Hebuku to Dubandereja, Nielage Pombu Raji, Koalas, Nielage Pombu Raji, what Janji was the Hibuku Dudujin.
Ale Ngamangatsu.
Dudujin
That's it.
Sunguyores.
That's it.
Yenlej Pombi Ranji Kuala. Joa Nemashi Machina. Tabatoni Jelo. Nema Jessa Majins. Nyalan Ku Pombo and Nabanju and Samba. Juma Maimba Majiba Ina Tabatoni Jessayo Mares. Sentient Koa Chamba La. And then Samba Mena and Hiji Chamber Chigmaris. Rangiton, Dendis, Manante Mamina, Genji to Kalacho, Tesoredo, Koa Chambala, Hiji Chamber and Jeto maybe Teba Chujun Kanto, Jujang, Samba de Shinto Kechos, Nanju Samba de Tijan Shuba in Anda, Temen Shuba in Anda, Lankaba Shuba in Nanju Samba Jira Kechores, Nanju Samba Banda Tijan Temeki, Yeden Kanchitu Mare, Tijan Temeki, Yeden Taji, Nanju Sambi Debores, Tamalarel Chichin.
The Nejung Mena Techen Teme Gar?
Yeden Langus Chigmaris, Teme Lang, Tijan Langa to Chitu.
Techen Langa, okay. Techen Teme.
Yeah, they are the Gatanga, the Paranga, the Parasanga, and Badiso, Teme Langa, Tijan Langa, some of the Chigmare, the Sukan and you Samba and Debudes on these.
So we've gone through the 8 different types of suffering, and we've looked at those 8 types of suffering and the 5 points within each. So we've looked at the 40 different points, the 40 different types of suffering. So when we look at Jayan Sheba's commentary on this text, we find that he, in this specific section, breaks it down into 2 categories. The first category are those 5 points that are made, and then there's a summary of the essence of it. And then, so we find a summary of all of the points. The summary begins right here. If you do not cultivate a genuine sense of disenchantment with cyclic existence, the nature of which is the appropriated aggregates, you will have no chance to develop a genuine mind intent on liberation. And there will be no way. So if you do not develop this disenchantment and develop a desire to definitely emerge, a renunciation, then you won't be able to develop this mind that is intent on becoming liberated. So you will have no chance to develop a genuine mind intent on liberation. And there will be no way for you to develop great compassion for living beings wandering through cyclic existence. So if we do not generate renunciation, a desire to the determination to be free. That's what it's called in the Lamrim Chenmo. If we don't generate this determination to be free, then we won't be able to generate compassion for others. And then we look at Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, and it says if we haven't thought of our own purpose, then how could we even dream of thinking of others? So that means that if we haven't developed our own sense of wanting to get out, renunciation, then we can't generate compassion for others. And then hence this reflection is extremely important regardless of which vehicle, Mahayana or Hinayana, you enter. So all of the excellent qualities of the Mahayana and the Hinayana arise from renunciation. All of the 5 paths of the here solitary realizers and bodhisattvas of the Hinayana and Mahayana require that and come about because of having this renunciation. So it becomes indispensable on the paths. And so those paths are the paths that we find kind of embedded in that mantra in the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge that says Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate, Parasangati, Bodhisoha. And this is implicitly, we find those 5 paths of the Hinayana and the Mahayana. I'll just list those as a note: the path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, and path of no more learning. So those 5 paths are come about because of renunciation, and all of the excellent qualities of those practitioners of the Hinayana and Mahayana come about by the same thing, renunciation. So if there is no renunciation, there is no paths, no 5 paths. Dixon.
Tanganyu somebody chibi talk on the jet, Tashi Karyore, Kandese, and then I knew somebody you can just do and this one thing.
So what is the method? What is the cause for the arisal of renunciation? And that's what we're going to get into now.
I knew somebody Juma Mayba Joa, Jama maybe Suro dance, Jama maybe Suro Kanju to Tenju to Jinjirota, Jama maybe Suro not down, Suro down, Gonde Sedenges. Jamame be soro kanju ten juji tesuke ndeba seden tendeki jesun drane kwa nada tetes ndeba seden tendeki jesun drane ane kwa naba taba jite gures nganju samba lo kwa naba taba machena ane nganju samba nada chegu maruta nganju wate kwa naba taba chebala ane jamame be soro kanju ten juji sinjere Jamame Suro Dan, Kanju Denji Gondig Seden, and the Jews Somola Suba Hotel Mobile, Seden Jesun Drane, Kuanada Tetes, and Ganju Sambal, Kuanaba Tabache, Kuanada Machana, Ganju Sabanada Chilmares, Kuanada Seba Ketchubares, Tene, Zinto, Susutubi, Chegunji, Lui Joa, Trabo. Don't go besa. Quad chasa sona, quad chasa sona tene, remember Susuta, Susu to be Sheraje, Susu to be Sheraje, Chegun, Josema Santane, Chegun Jegus, Chegun Marba, Shanchu, Chinela Tebagumba, and I knew Sambatan, Shanchu Sangumba and Chegun Gosos, and I knew somebody to Chegun is what Chegun. Chegun. Chegunji Lui Jua Jabo, Dun Gubis, Josemo Santane, and Lui Jua Jabo, Sansu Jabo Jabaj Gugures, Jabon Dun Gubis, Jonden Deji, Dungen Ku Niemi Sheba, Duden Ku Niemi Sheba La, Dungen Jesumbi. Ne combat ça Jonden Deji Doden Kui Nemi Doden Nemi Salama Bena Tabatuni Jimeji Kunjun Kui Jose Masona Kui Zawa Josu Mejibe Silengan Jushi Dambatan Kwa Kangi Jiba Sheba Shalari Duden Watun de Hedoda Jonden Deji Doden Kui Nemi Shebalas Jonden Deji Doden Kui Niemi de Shebala, Dogen Jun, Shebala, Dogen Jesumbi, Niemi Shebala, what the Niemi Shebiche, what Dogen Jet Sumbares, Tejet Timing and Dodu Mobile, what Dogen Sunwares, what the Tamar Jichin Sumba Gumba, Papa Tumeji, Tela Oba. Doa Tara Sheba Yinos, that Jermashi Wate, Dunga Jet to Zukangalo, and Papa Tome Dualusun Doa. Sadanga, Donani, Doa, and Kuduji the Marbe. Papa Tome Dualusun to Dualusun Jabate, what the enrichment of the Sumba is, what the Sun is.
So now, okay, so. Even when you develop a sense of disenchantment with cyclic existence, follow flawless scriptures and authoritative commentaries and seek an exact understanding of them. Then use prolonged and discerning analytical meditation to bring about a powerful transformation of your mind. Use such texts that are to learn and have gain an understanding of these points. And so it says scriptures and authoritative authoritative commentaries. So this is talking about the pronouncements of Lord Buddha, and then those authentic Indian commentaries, the Khensur and the Tanjir. But there are many other texts as well. So we can find the Lama Tsongkhapa's collected works in Kirtap and Gyaltsab, the Sumbom, and many other works that would be authoritative. So we look to these texts to be able to have an exact understanding of these points so that we can develop a sense of disenchantment with cyclic existence. If we don't develop a sense of disenchantment with cyclic existence, it's not possible for us to generate renunciation, a desire to definitely emerge. And then if we don't generate that, then the other excellent qualities spoken of will not arise either. And then it says, then use prolonged and discerning analytical meditation. So it requires analysis. Analytical, there are two kinds of meditation, analytical and single-pointed. This analytical meditation is necessary. It is said necessary if one wishes to generate renunciation, if one wishes to generate the mind that aspires to enlightenment or bodhicitta. Analysis becomes indispensable. That's what is meant there. And then to bring about powerful transformation of your mind, to change your mind in a very strong way, so that you have this determination to be free. You have this disenchantment that then allows you to generate renunciation. Thus, I have followed the well-founded presentation of the Noble Asanga in explaining the Bhagavan's purpose in teaching the 8 types of suffering as a way to understand the truth of suffering, the faults of cyclic existence. So here Lama Tsongkhapa is stating that the sources of this material are Lord Buddha, and then also a Sangha. And Sangha, we find, has the 2 collections of works. First, the 5 treatises on the levels, and then the 2 compendiums. This particular point we find in the compendium on the Mahayana, in the Dulwa. So this is so the two compendiums are the compendium of knowledge and then a compendium of Mahayana, and then we have the 5 treatises on the levels. So we'll find these points on this 8 types of suffering from those 2 sources. So it's necessary to look at the faults of cyclic existence in order to understand the truth of suffering, and then in order to generate disenchantment, to be able to generate renunciation. And if we look at Lama Tsongkhapa's abbreviated stages of the path, the Lamrim Duden, we find if you do not make an effort to think about true sufferings and their drawbacks, you will not properly develop a keen interest to work for liberation. If you not consider the stages by where true origins of all suffering place and keep you in cyclic existence, you will not know the means for cutting the root of this vicious circle. Therefore, you should cherish exuding complete disgust and renunciation of such existence, while knowing which factors bind you to its wheel. I, the yogi, have practiced just that. If you also seek liberation, please cultivate yourself in the same way. So we find that emphasis on thinking about the drawbacks of cyclic existence in order to generate renunciation, which will then allow one to be liberated. So looking at the outline makes it much easier for us to understand, for instance, the 8 types of suffering, the 6 types of suffering, and the 3 types of suffering. If we look at the first suffering in the 8 types of suffering, we find a quote from Nagarjuna from the letter to a friend, and it states, "Your Highness, be disenchanted with cyclic existence, which is the origin of many sufferings, being deprived of what you want, death, illness, old age, and so on." So there, we do find 4 of the 8 types of suffering stated explicitly, but the other 4 are what is called intended by words, intended by the words, and so on. So they are not explicitly stated. Only those 4 are explicitly stated. And so even if we thought about it very slowly, it would be difficult for us to understand what those 8 are based on this Nagarjuna's quote. But looking at the outline allows us to readily understand that, or understand that easily.
What are the legend? What the what the German shitting road down and Gomulu doing jet. Most of them by jet on Sudi do just say do that doing jet my Dusantele dual sondos. How about to make dual sondos daughter? German contours out to the door. Shendachimulu to 2 many roll to do.
The Tepa Champi Dua.
Do and do the
Tome Becha Tepa Champi Dua.
Duaro Sadanga Donani. Okay.
Just to make sure I'm right. So these 8 types of suffering are presented by. So we find the 8 types of suffering. In the first type of suffering, we find the quote from Nagarjuna under the suffering of birth. And where do all these 8 types of suffering come from? We find them, Lord Buddha presented them, and then also in Sangha's text, the compendium of the Mahayana. So Sangha has the 5 treatises on the levels and the 2 compendiums, the compendium of knowledge and then the compendium of the Mahayana. So this would be found in the compendium on the Mahayana. It's on the Mahayana, not a compendium on the Mahayana.
Chiba chiba tenla papa dowa le sheba yino ta putu ishe ne sa putu ishe ne riru kanto che penche na sa tang chewa la subi dongen juwa ne na ju shi na wa yin chi ju shi chewa yin jis tila me yu wa lubu tu shungwa min ku Chenrezig rajin kwa nerin la tele mandis raja tela hi jona jopungus tela jupungu batar mashebi chiga nachi dengan juma na tela juma la teta to Sansos, what the Mata so drowned water. Put do not drown, but do you know? Redu can't to Jejang, do a retro, Dendoson and Gandoson, do a retro can't to Jejang, Penchena, and Nasatan, Choala Subi, Dungan Juane. And Redu Kandu Jijan, the Chivata Nai Dungana Subat Yungu, Jumate, Najushi now I let on Jummo with just a shinjitla, then Nagari Shagres. Now I Chijushi, Chiwa Yijis, Chijushi, let on Jummo with just a shinjitla, sugar or Nagare, Gainagres, Yijis, Tela Mayuba she lubut Juamares, Rava, let on Jummo. Jezang wote gawa tang kiwa lo su tu su yung wo wares jesa shenshi delte jega nachi dunga la su ba tu su jungwa de me yo ba ma res lo bu de jungwa me ku tenni da ra yin is le don yo mo jesa shenshi jega nachi dunga la su ba tu su ku tenni ra yin res ra yin ko ne rin la tele ma de ko ne bi rin de what the Chesa Shinji, the Chega Nachi Dungala Subatu, and Telemadi Barete Yungures, Raja Tele Jonas Raja Tela in Jonas calling about Jonah. Job Bungus, quality Job Bungur, Job Mumatuna. I know what to sing about the Job Bungures, Job Bumbala, the Jobungus, Marvel. Then doing a puppy about doing it, Bumbala, doing it, Jokunjo Bungures, what is one thing that tell a Job Bungu Sombatar Hashibi, Jaga Nachisuji, doing it, Joan Nala, Tata Samosa. What they do
Okay, so so thus I have followed the well-founded presentation of the noble Asanga in explaining the Bhagavan's purpose in teaching the 8 types of suffering as a way to understand the truth of suffering and the faults of cyclic existence. Now we have a quote from Potawa. It says, Potawa said, "As soon as we are born in any one of the 6 types of beings, we are faced with the sufferings of sickness, death, and so forth. When the cause of sickness is present, when we are sick. When the cause of death is present, we die. This is neither inappropriate nor accidental. It is the character or nature of cyclic existence. While we are in cyclic existence, there is no escaping it. If we are disgusted by it, then we must eliminate the process of birth. To do this, we must eliminate the cause." So, when going back to the top, there's much information here. As soon as we are born in any one of the 6 types of beings, so these are the 3 higher realm beings or the 3 lower realm beings, making for a total of 6, we are faced with the sufferings of sickness, death, and so forth. So as soon as we are born into these appropriated aggregates by our karma and afflictions, we have to face these types of suffering, sickness, death, etc. Birth, then aging, sickness, etc. When the cause of sickness is present, we are sick. So when the cause of sickness, the karma, and the afflictions bring about the sickness, then we're sick. When the cause of death is present, we die. When they bring about the cause for death, and then we die. And then it says this is neither inappropriate nor accidental. So this isn't something that just haphazardly happens. This is something that happens as a result of this happens as a result of that. It happens because we have these aggregates brought about by our karma and afflictions. Therefore, we have this basis that will get sick, that has to experience the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, etc. While we are in cyclic existence, there is no escaping it. There's no way to get out of this. If we are in cyclic existence, we have to experience this. Birth, aging, sickness, and death. So we have to experience these various types of suffering. While we are in cyclic existence, there's no escaping it. So that's what I just read. I know that. So we can't escape these various types of suffering if we are in cyclic existence. If we are disgusted by it, then we must eliminate the process of birth. So if we generate a desire to definitely emerge, renunciation, then we have to get rid of the process of being born. And then to get rid of the process of being born, we have to get rid of what causes that. And so when we look at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, of the Four Noble Truths, Buddha stated that this is the superior truth of suffering, and then stated that this is the superior truth of origin, suffering to be understood, origin, abandon. This is what is meant by that. One must abandon the cause in order to get rid of the result, and in this case, abandon the origin in order to get rid of the result, which is suffering. Then Lama Tsongkhapa says, reflect in this way on the arisings of sufferings explained above, the sufferings of birth, old age, illness, death, and so forth. So we finished those 8 types of suffering.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've now finished the section on the 8 types of suffering, and we don't have a lot of time left, so we'll end here, but if anyone does have a question before we go, feel free to ask. Kat has a question.
Rinpoche, would you please explain who resides in the formless realms?
Rinpoche, the
Thank you.
Zume Kam Su De Lu.
Zume kan what the Zume kan de gores.
So the formless gods abide there. When you say who, when you want more detail, like who, it's another form of cyclic existence. It's like there's a hell or a hungry ghost or an animal. There's a formless God. There's no form, so it's hard to explain what it would look like.
And what is the definition of God?
The Tsenigare. So they engage in a meditation where they push out, if you will, or the form, feeling, and so forth, various forms. Zudra Dre Ro. There's forms, so they abandon forms, they abandon colors, they abandon shapes, and they engage in this single-pointed meditation. And therefore, as a result of this concentration, they become formless realm beings. So in dependence upon this meditation, then they don't there's no seeing of a form.
So there
are four places in the formless realm. The peak, nothingness, limitless consciousness, and limitless space. So there are 4 categories of the formless realm beings.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you so?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yes.
Just a point of clarification. We were saying that renunciation is necessary for the development of compassion. Does that mean that the presence of compassion is an indication of a level of renunciation?
You have, yeah, the Chiron, the neighbor John, the Ninji Yengu, the neighbor John Ninji Ju. Then the Ninji Yuna, neighbor John Yu Chap. Yes, so if you have compassion, then you necessarily have renunciation.
I see.
There's
different kinds of compassion, though. So this is where speaking of great compassion. When we speak of this kind of compassion, it's great compassion. That requires renunciation. So the smaller type of compassion we have towards dogs and cats, and we have this compassion for them. This isn't what we're speaking of. That kind of compassion isn't what great compassion is. Great compassion is the type of compassion that wishes for our friends, enemies, and neutrals to have be free from suffering and the causes of suffering in an equal way, our friends, enemies, and neutrals. So when we look at the 7-point cause and effect, it becomes the 5th. So we have recognizing all sentient beings as our mother, remembering their kindness, wishing to repay their kindness, love through the force of attraction, and then great compassion arises. And so if there are no more questions,
We'll
we'll do the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. Thank you again, Rinpoche, for helping. Oh, my head hurts. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drakpa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well, with whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times. I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all-powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso, to stay until samsara's end. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Wandak, upholder of scriptural and realization of doctrines, spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts with exceptional wisdom and perseverance. Tuji Rinpoche Kuzi Shabi Tenala.